All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks, Mark. I'm Jake Shanowski. I'm one of the engineers here at Lake Country Power. Tonight I'm going to just give you a quick overview of what's going on in the engineering and operations department and kind of the stuff behind the scenes to make the whole system work. Start out with a big map of our system. We cover a pretty big area. We go from, on the north side, we've got Orr and Ely, all the way down south to Moose Lake, and over on the west side is Walker. So it's a lot of line to maintain. All those blue dots on the screen, those are age replacement projects for this year. We do about 75 miles of line replacement every year, and a lot of that is 1940s and 1950s old line. So it's a lot of the stuff that's been there a long time. It's served us well. A lot of the stuff your parents and grandparents saw go up. So that's the stuff we got to start replacing. And we pick those projects every year based on quite a few criteria. The main ones are age of the line, outages, and crew input. Our crews are out there every day, so we take their input seriously and try to fit in projects that they see equipment failures happening. The yellow dots on there are system improvement projects. Those are our single phase to three phase, our tie lines that we're building, or our overhead to underground conversion projects. So those are the areas that the projects that give us some flexibility and kind of allow for us to expand for load growth, or if we have problems, some of those tie lines we can backfeed neighboring substations and keep the power on. The one red dot up there is our substation for the year. That's our Pike River substation. It's actually in this district. We have 46 substations on our system, and we try to do about one a year. That gives them about a 50-year life. And similar to line projects, we base which substation we do every year on age, accessibility, and safety and reliability. So. Just a close-up view of District 3. That's the district we're in right now. That's got the substation in there, like I mentioned. That's over on County Road 68, north of Virginia. The blue dots in there are age projects in this district. So we've got one south of Mountain Iron, a couple up by Britt, one over by Side Lake, and one over by north of Nashwauk. And I have details on those projects if you want to hit me up afterwards. If you're curious on exactly where they're at, I can certainly show you. Our substation for the year, Pike River. So this will be, we're going to be starting in May and hopefully wrapping up in October before deer season. That's my one goal. That's my big goal of the year for the substation. This is our 9th pad mount substation we built. We've been building these for a little over 10 years. You can see on the right-hand side that big H steel frame structure. That's where the transmission line comes into it. And then it goes to the transformer, and from there it goes underground to all those boxes. They're all metal enclosed, grounded, tamper-resistant boxes. And that really helps for reliability we don't have a lot less resistant outages for trees, birds, critters, wind, hail, you name it. Safer switching for the crews, and it's a lot more reliable substation design we've found. We've had really good luck for the past 10 years with all these substations we've been building. Construction crew update. So we've got 2 construction crews. We've got one in Cohasset and one in Mountain Iron. We hired these crews around the 2021-22 periods. They save us about $550,000 a year right now on work that we would be doing anyways. We would be hiring out this work to contractors. Instead, we're able to keep it in-house and save money. In 2026, we're going to have them start doing underground construction as well. So right now, they've been focusing on overhead line rebuilds. Now this year, they're going to start doing underground as well. So we can further save on contractor dollars by having our internal crews do the underground. In 2027, we're hoping to hire one more construction crew in our KR area, our Kettle River area, and they'll be housed in our Saginaw, our new Saginaw outpost, and they'll do, similar to these other crews, 22.5 miles of overhead and underground construction each year. Speaking of Saginaw, there's our new Saginaw outpost. It's a little dark there, but that's a project we started last summer, and we're hoping it should be wrapped up here shortly within, I'd say, this winter still. It's a $2.8 million project, replaces an older building that was on site. That'll house, we've got 4 line workers over there right now, the 5 construction crew line workers, an AMI tech, a mechanic, and a potential tree crew in the future. So the real valuable thing about having these outposts is these crews are stationed in these areas, so it's less time to get to outages and just your general day-to-day maintenance activities. They're already in the area, so it's close for them, less driving time. DRUs, so these are demand response units. These units right there, if you've got cycled AC, interruptible water heating or electric heat on one of our programs, you have one of those little boxes by your meter, and we're replacing those system-wide. So we've end about 15,000 of them on our system right now, and we're about 60% complete, and we hope to have it complete by end of 2027. So what's the real benefit of those? This is a graph, January 20th of 25, of what our system peak what our system demand looked like for that day. So how much power we were using during that whole day. So you can see we start out right there, and we kind of dip down at that 6 to 7 p.m., and then we spike back up around midnight. So the reason we're dipping down like that is those units are operating. So we're actually cycling your hot water heater, well, this would have winter, so no AC, but we're cycling your hot water heater and your electric heat. So we're reducing that load on our system, because GRE, and part of our bill for GRE is based on how much demand we have. And so they bill us at that coincident time, which GRE is coincident, which means that their peak time is around 6 to 7 p.m. So they bill us at that 6 to 7 p.m. So what we do is we cycle that stuff to lower our demand, and then so we pay GRE less in demand rates. And so that's how we're able to give members a better rate if you're on those programs. And then the caveat of that is that we got to turn everybody back on, and then our our demand is going to jump way up because everything's coming on at one time. So we got to build our system to handle that high peak, but that it works out in the end to have the program so we get that reduced billing rate. Trees. So we've got a lot of trees on our system, and they're really nice to look at, but they're the #1 cause of outages on our system. So we spend a lot of time and ends up being a lot of money on trees. This year we're doing about 750 miles of right-of-way clearing, which is typical. We're going to be on the western side of the system, so not in this district this year, but western and southwestern over by Walker and McGregor. We're on a 7-year right-of-way cycle right now. We're hoping to move to a 6-year right-of-way cycle in 2028. So that's going to add about 250 miles to the total miles we're clearing every year, so we'll be over 1,000. And it's going to add some costs. We're going to add probably close to $1 million in cost. That's including we're going to be able to reduce some mowing and spraying because we're clearing the trees more often. We're not going to have to mow and spray as much in that interim period. But this is my 6-7 picture up top. So you can see on the 6-year, this is the 6 years. It's kind of hard to see, but a lot of those aspen trees are below the neutral right now, and on the 6-year. But when you get to the 7-year, the fast-growing trees get up into the neutral. And that's where you have a lot of your blinks and outages and power quality issues. So we're hoping that if we can clear everything every 6 years instead of every 7 years, well, that'll help us out quite a bit in reliability. One stat there is that in 2025, 37% of all of our outages were caused by trees, and 68% of the total outage time was due to trees. So it's a big deal for outage reliability, and so that's why I think this cost is worth it in the long run to get better power quality. That's all I have from engineering and operations. We got Tracy next, who's going to talk about financials, and I'll be around afterwards if you got any questions.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out on such a nice night. And thank you, Jake. I am Tracy Peterson-Wertinen. I have the pleasure to serve as your CFO at Lake Country Power. If you have attended one of these meetings in the last several years, you've heard a pretty consistent message from me. Tonight, you'll hear a very similar message. Costs continue to increase. These cost increases continue to add rate pressure, and that rate pressure has necessitated rate changes. We'll take a brief look at our 2026 operating budget, necessary 2026 rate changes, and then an example of how those rate changes may impact you. Our total operating budget for this year is $124.3 million based on all the components. That is a revenue requirement for 2026. So what does that look like? Our most significant expense is the cost of purchased power, as you could imagine. We buy all of our power from Great River Energy. They provide power generation and transmission, and Lake Country Power then distributes that to all of our members. So essentially, 52 cents of every dollar we earn in revenue this year goes to the cost of purchased power. It's roughly $64 million of our budget. We have over $300 million of assets out in our distribution system, in our buildings, our equipment, our vehicles. But in my opinion, that green piece of the pie right there, that 14%, represents our most important assets, our people. That 14% of our 2026 budget will contribute to labor and benefits for our over 140 employees that work to serve you each and every day throughout the year. That's about $17 million of our 2026 budget. Continuing clockwise, we have depreciation and interest expense. They are necessary expenses that we are required to cover through our rates and our revenue every year, and that's roughly 18% of our 2026 budget. Moving on to the other category, the purple section there, that piece of the pie chart represents our operational and maintenance expenses, consumer and member expenses, admin and general expenses, things that aren't accounted for otherwise in that pie chart. Roughly 7 cents of every dollar that we earn in 2026 will go towards that wide array of expenses. The orange slice is our right-of-way expense, the things that Jake was just talking about. He gave you a snapshot of the impact of what right-of-way does on reliability throughout our system. Mark is also going to talk a bit about reliability when he's up here. This spend is one of the most impactful things that we can do each and every year to improve reliability for you, our membership. In 2026, that makes up about 5% of our total budget. Converting that to dollars, it's roughly $6.4 million that we intend to spend this year on right-of-way clearing. Lake Country Power is a not-for-profit electric cooperative that is not the same as a nonprofit. As such, we are bound to operate in a way that meets a variety of financial requirements and covenants, including a certain level of annual margin or annual operating margin that we must achieve. That bright blue, sky blue piece at the top, the 3%, our 2026 budget allows for an operating margin of around $3.5 million, or roughly 3% of our total budget for this year. That's essentially our total revenue requirement, subtracting all the other pieces of that pie. So moving forward into 2026, it came to the conclusion, our board came to the conclusion, our management came to the conclusion that that revenue requirement would lead to rate changes again this year. So what does that look like? At the December board meeting, through the budget process, our board approved wide-ranging rate increases to accommodate for and align with the increases in our 2026 purchase power costs, as well as what I just showed you on that pie chart. So effective January 1st, load management programs were changed for our residential and commercial members, those who participate in the load management programs that Jake was talking about. These changes vary by program and are a direct result of changes in rates from Great River Energy to Lake Country Power. They're essentially a pass-through. Moving into March, all general service rates, which is kind of your normal electric usage, not on a program, not on a special rate, for our residential and our commercial members, we'll see an increase of 0.61 cents per kilowatt hour, which is roughly a 4% increase, give or take, during the time of year. Also, the service availability charge will see a change in March. Our residential and small commercial members will see a change from $48 per month to $50 per month for that service availability charge. So what might these changes mean for you? What impact might it have? We do understand that there is impact, and when we do make these changes, we take the consideration of all of our membership very seriously. So to do the math, I just came up with a simple example of 1,000 kilowatts of general service usage. If you're on the off-peak and dual fuel programs, 1,000 kilowatts for each of those as well. If you look on the very left side, you'll see the 2026 rates and what will happen once those new rates are all in effect. Roughly $354 a month, assuming you use 1,000 kilowatts for each of those types. You see the $50 service availability charge on the top. Compare that to 2025 rates, it's about a $15 per month increase. I do want you all to keep in mind that everybody's electricity usage habits, patterns is different. This may not be representative of you, but it's just an example of what one might expect with these changes. I do want to mention, if you have specific questions about how these rates may impact you individually, please feel free to reach out to our office. We have people there willing to help you each and every day. The detail of the rate changes is on our website. If you ever view our website on lakecountrypower.coop, under cooperative news at the bottom of the landing page, you will see a detailed list of all the rate changes, both that took effect on January 1st, as well as those that will take effect on March. That's all I have for tonight. I'm going to turn it over now to Mara Spaeth, our IT manager.
Thank you, Tracy. Like Tracy said, my name is Mara Spaeth, and I am the IT manager at Lake Country Power. I'm going to talk to you about staying safe in our digital world. So we're going to talk about what we see happening in our digital world, what we do, and what you can do. The top 5 technology buzzwords in my world are cybersecurity, cyber attacks, email phishing, and email spam, and the newest kid on the block, artificial intelligence. So what is cybersecurity? It is, in general, is a plan. It's a plan to protect our networks and our devices and information from people who shouldn't really have access to them. So every day, our systems see activity, things happening in the background, and most of those are normal, and that's what we call events. So they happen all the time. But an incident is when something crosses the line, some unauthorized access or real risk to our information. So most events never become incidents. And we plan for the mindset of when, not if. Planning ahead prevents problems, and it's the same reason you carry insurance or lock your car doors. So a cyber attack is the when, so what we've been planning for. There are different kinds of cyber attacks. Data breaches is probably some things that you hear about a lot. That's when someone just tries to steal information, electronic information. And once they have it, they can sell it, they can use it for scams, or to try to trick people into giving up more information. If they have this much information about you to feed you, maybe you have some trust and you'll give them some more information. Ultimately, though, they are trying to make some money off of your information. Ransomware is when criminals lock access to information and demand payment to unlock it. Imagine someone breaking into your filing cabinet, locking all the doors and telling you that you have to pay for the keys if you want to get your data back. So the goal isn't always stealing the information. It's more like creating pressure and disruption and trying to get your money. But sometimes they get money by stealing and selling that information. But the end game is they're trying to make money off of you. Now, critical infrastructure attacks target essential services like the utility companies and hospitals and government agencies. These are the kind of attacks you see on the worldwide news. They're designed to cause disruption and get attention. Sometimes the disruption can be for political gain or financial gain. They are rare, but they're always taken very seriously. So I'm going to move on to some things that actually will more likely affect you in your day-to-day with phishing emails. So phishing is when someone sends fake email, a text, or a message that looks real and tries to trick you into revealing personal information. Things like your password, your social security number, your credit card numbers, to contact us using a fake web address or a phone number. Their goal is to trick someone into clicking a link or sharing information. At Lake Country Power, we will never call or email you and ask for your password or your entire social security number, and we don't even take credit card payments over the email or the phone. We do direct a member to pay using SmartHub or our phone payment system or in person at one of our service centers. Remember, though, when accessing SmartHub, always verify that the website you're going to is the same as what you see listed on your bill. When paying by phone, always make sure that the 800 number that is printed on your bill is what you're contacting us with. So our members our employees take training to recognize when an email might be a phishing attempt. So we're taught to recognize red flags. Think of an email or a message that you received that asked for personal information, and what made it suspicious? In other words, what were those red flags? Was there something urgent or threatening language in that email? Action required urgently, if your account is suspended or it's even deleted, something that makes you're kind of surprised and taken aback by what you see. That's a red flag. Is there suspicious sender information? Does the email address match where it says it's from? Is the spelling correct, or is there another dot something in the middle of that to make it different from an actual email address? Or do you recognize who it's from? Does the name look right, but they're asking you something that is out of character? There's one time I got a fish test from Mark, and it was an email asking me to send him my payroll bank account information, which I thought was very odd, and so that was a red flag.
You didn't send it to me.
I didn't. Try harder. So is an email requesting personal information. So Lake Country Power and other legitimate organizations know better than to put your information at risk, and we will never email you asking you to respond with that information. Are there misspellings or grammatical errors? Sometimes things in emails literally get lost in translation because a lot of the people that are trying to do this phishing are from overseas, and so their English is not their first language. So be careful that you're looking at the actual wording and how things are grammatically spelled. So follow your spidey senses. We kind of listen to your gut and stay safe. So can you spot the difference between these? Well, the can tells you what's inside before you open it. But spam email is unwanted email that's sent out in large amounts. They're playing the odds that someone will respond. So they send out 1 million emails and maybe 100 will respond. Well, they kind of got people in. So some spam emails contain links or attachments that lead to phishing or malware, so installing some software on your computer and getting your information from there. But even seemingly harmless spam should be treated carefully. At Lake Country Power, we have an email filter that blocks thousands of spam messages every week before anybody even sees them. So what can you do at home? You can check your email provider and if it has a spam filter, but don't always depend on it catching it. If you don't recognize the sender, don't click or open attachments, delete it or mark as spam in your email. Later on, if you realize that it was something that you should have seen, you can always go back into your deleted items and your spam and recover that email. So artificial intelligence has been the loudest buzzword lately. On the Super Bowl ads, I counted 15 commercials that featured AI platforms alone. So in 2025, AI stopped being something only the big tech and big companies used, and it started showing up in our everyday life. And a lot of people are asking why. Well, it's because it became affordable and widely available all at once. There was faster internet, there was cloud services that are available, and the biggest nerdy side of it is that the open source programming for AI models was open, so there was more competition of people writing the software platforms that were advertising at the Super Bowl, and it reduces the cost. So it's a classic supply chain supply and demand scenario. So what is artificial intelligence? We're going to give you the very boiled down version. It's a technology that helps computers learn and make suggestions. It's like a digital assistant, and it learns from experience. Something very important, though, is that people are in charge of the information. The AI model can only learn from information that people feed it. So if you feed it good information, it can learn quickly and correctly. But if the information is wrong or incomplete or misleading, those results can be wrong, too. It's like if you're getting directions from someone who has a bad map. You will get directions, and it will send you somewhere, but you might not be getting where you wanted to go in the first place. So we've actually been using AI products at Lake Country Power for years. Our Fortinet firewall uses AI to recognize suspicious internet traffic trying to come into our network, and it blocks it. Darktrace is a program we use that uses AI to spot unusual activity inside of our network, and it can isolate anything that we see. And our email filter, like I spoke about, it uses AI to recognize and block the spam and phishing and unusual activity. So our computer backup also, we have a big backup system that backs up our servers and our databases and even our computers, and that is an AI product that securely backs things up. So coming down the road, we have plans to use AI even more. We'll use tools to help summarize meetings and notes so our staff can spend more time solving problems and serving our members directly. Outage management has software companies that are using AI to help us in dispatch with outage responses and prioritization. And our member services department, many co-ops are using virtual assistants and chats on their website, and it looks for usage analysis and helps with call routing. And even in our communication department, we have an automated outage notifications and real-time update system that we'll be implementing this year. So a lot of business improvements will be coming quickly when we utilize AI. So that's the buzz in my IT world: the cybersecurity, cyber attacks, phishing, spam, and artificial intelligence. We want you to feel confident in how we protect your data and to know that you can protect yourself too. Thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Mark.
Turn that one off. Thank you, Mara. I'm back. I'm going to talk about a couple of concerns we have related to reliability and affordability. And what I'm going to talk about is bigger than just what we do at Lake Country Power. I'm going to talk, grid-wide, nationwide. I'm going to explain a couple of acronyms. Typically in this industry, we talk a lot in acronyms. I'll do my best to explain what they are. This one's a little hard to see down here. It's NERC, N-E-R-C. It's the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. They fall under FERC, their acronym, that's Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. But what NERC does, what they're responsible for, is doing assessments of the grid, both short-term and long-term, and their reliability assessments. And I'll get into what their latest assessment just showed in a little bit. And then MISO, that's the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. That's the regional grid that we're a part of in the Midwest. It goes from Manitoba all the way down to Louisiana. I'll show you on a map and what that looks like. Some of the concerns related to reliability. We are putting an increased reliance on power generation sources that are intermittent and weather dependent, mostly wind and solar. Both MISO and NERC, the two organizations I just explained, have issued warnings and continue to issue warnings of potential energy shortfalls. And MISO studies have consistently shown that once a grid exceeds about 40% renewables, it becomes exponentially unreliable. And then I'll spend some time talking about the January 2026 polar vortex that we just came out of. And I'll show you what was keeping the lights on at that time. But the NERC assessment, I'll get into that first. They just finished this in January, so this is pretty much hot off the press. But we are in the MISO market, which is this footprint right down the middle. Obviously, you know where we are, northern Minnesota, but it's a much bigger area than that MISO is responsible for. And MISO is the grid operator. They call on power plants to run, and they make sure that there's enough adequate resources to meet demands. What this is showing, by 2028, they consider our area, the whole MISO footprint, to be high risk of energy shortfalls. So what does that study actually say? It says projected resource additions, think power generation. Resource additions do not keep pace with escalating demand forecasts and announced generator retirements. So what goes into this? Every utility that owns generating assets has to file some sort of a report. In Minnesota, it's the Integrated Resource Plan. GRE does this on our behalf because it's their power generation, not ours. But every utility does that. An Integrated Resource Plan that lays out what their future plans are, what they're going to build, what they're going to retire. And in those plans is a lot of retirement of carbon-emitting sources, fossil fuel sources, coal plants, natural gas plants. So this is what NERC is looking at and saying, demand is expected to increase, but you're also planning to retire some generating assets. This is where we're going to run into some issues. Now, there's normal risk for 2026, elevated 2027, but high risk for 2028 and beyond. So what you have to do in MISO, GRE is our MISO participant, every year you have to forecast what your load is going to be, prove that you have resources to do that, plus what they call a planning reserve margin. This one is looking at winter, but MISO would prefer the planning reserve margin be about 20% for the winter. So they want you to have adequate stuff for your load plus a 20% cushion. And the reason that is, for lack of a better term, shit happens, right? Plants could go down for maintenance, something could break or trip. They want to be assurances that there's enough capacity to meet load. But by 2028, they're expected that planning reserve margin to be about 7 gigawatts below what they would like to see. So for reference, what's 7 gigawatts? Coal Creek Station, the largest coal plant in North Dakota, is just barely over 1 gigawatt. So we're talking about like 7 large coal plants short. It's a big number. So I'll talk about heat and then I'll talk about cold. So in extreme heat, this was June 23rd of last summer at 6:50 p.m. It was one of those days where it was hot, humid, overcast. It was just nasty. So I thought, well, I'm going to look in MISO. What's keeping the lights on? Because MISO itself peaks in the summer. Our system peaks in the winter. Jake showed you one of our load curves. Ours peaks in overnight hours of the winter. But MISO in general has more electricity usage in the summer. But what was keeping the lights on that day? It was dead calm, sticky through all of MISO and overcast. So between coal and gas, that was 77% of what was keeping your houses comfortable or your lights on. Add nuclear is another 10%. So you're looking at 87% of the generating resources at that time were either carbon emitting or nuclear. Wind was 6%. It's this little green piece here. Quite often you'll see that higher, but this was one of those pretty calm, sticky days. Solar less than 1. It was overcast. Other 4%. That's mostly hydro. Most of that comes out of Canada. There's some two-way purchase agreements with Manitoba Hydro, where we will buy energy in the summer when they have excess. We will sell energy back to them in the winter when their hydro resources they aren't that effective in the winter or not as effective. Things tend to freeze up. Water flow reduces in the winter. Then 6% of the energy in MISO was coming from somewhere else, importing 6% of it. But that number at the top, $909 a megawatt hour, for reference, if you were exposed to a real-time market, GRE participates mostly day ahead, placing hedges so we're not exposed to price fluctuations like this, but that $900 a megawatt hour equates to about 90 cents a kilowatt hour. If you had to buy it out of the market, it would have been 90 cents. We sell it for 14, 15, 16, depending on the season. If you were exposed to that, you would have lost a lot of money. So, cold. This was a couple of weeks ago, January 24th. This was the polar vortex that we were under. So I thought, well, I was looking at MISO a lot because my phone started lighting up with warnings and emergency alerts. So what was it then? Even more, 39 coal, 38 gas, nuclear at 13. It was dead calm. You live around here, you know that. When it gets that cold, when it gets 30, 35 below, it is dead calm. And at 6 o'clock in the morning when this was, it was still dark, so solar was doing nothing. But this is what it looked like for days. That polar vortex that sat over us was a little bit abnormal in how far south it went and how far east it went. So typical planning for that from like a GRE perspective, 2 to 4 days, and then we kind of come out of it. This one lasted for 10 days. And this is what was carrying the load for those 10 days. It was coal and gas. So this is what I was talking about, MISO alerts. You can look on the MISO app or their website anytime. It updates every 5 minutes. But this was at that 6 o'clock in the morning time frame when they were issuing alerts. They went to emergency alert level 2, the dark orange there. So what it means the grid is stable. And the grid was stable. But right down here, it says one option is for MISO to ask member utilities to encourage consumers to conserve power. And that's what we did. GRE asked us, MISO asked their participating utilities, GRE asked us, will you issue a plea for your members to conserve energy uses? So that's what we did. That's why you saw that. That wasn't a Lake Country Power initiated process. That was coming from the grid operator at that time. The next step here, if you get into that red, it's power interruptions are imminent or happening. So what that means, like blackouts. That's what's next. They would have to do rolling blackouts to reduce load before the grid ended up collapsing. So it was close. It was stable, but it was close. The next step is a big problem. We took some heat. If you follow our social media channels, when we issued that, please conserve message, there were some people that were jumping on us about that, like, get your act together. For the amount we pay you, you got to be able to keep the lights on, comments like that. But this was much bigger than just Lake Country Power. Our distribution system is made to handle weather like this. It's not abnormal for us to see weather like this. It's abnormal for that much of the country to see it at the same time. At that same time, this was January 23rd, so at the evening before, MISO's price was $945. The Minnesota price was over $1,300, so that's $1.35 a kilowatt hour if you had to buy that in the market. It got to $2,000. I didn't see that. I wasn't able to grab a screenshot of that, but it got to $2,000 in Minnesota. So that's an issue. But the reason it got to that, part of what was happening, the natural gas supplies were constrained because of the amount of the country that needed natural gas supply. So they reserve a chunk of that for home heating. So then utilities are either controlled on what they can get, but at $200, it was more economical for Great River Energy to burn fuel oil in their peaking plants. They've got a fleet of peaking stations that can either run on natural gas or run on fuel oil. And those peakers only run when they need to in periods like this. But they went through 2.5 million gallons of fuel oil during that polar vortex. But we saw it coming. We knew this. January 21st is this one. January 24th is that one. Like, the important thing I want to reference here, you can look on days, this green portion is the wind, 26%. A lot of days it looks like that. But we saw wind forecasts and we saw temperatures drop, and we knew that wind was going to fall to almost nothing. And it did. So what happens when the wind falls off, wind to almost nothing? It's mostly natural gas then that ramps up, because gas is dispatchable. you can count on it. Wind and solar are not. You can't just say, wind, blow, we need you. But we do have a fleet of generating assets that are dispatchable. The important point to make is that we need to keep those, or we're going to have serious problems with grid reliability. Wind does fall off like this, happens all the time. And then we have resources that can ramp up. But there's legislation in Minnesota, I'll touch on it a little bit, and there's a push nationally too, where people feel like we need to totally eliminate any fossil fuel usage or any carbon emitting sources of power. Well, we don't get to live in that fantasy land as utilities. In reality, this is what happens. Wind and solar can be a supplement and they can be effective, but they don't have any ability to replace what you already have, because you just can't count on them. They're not dispatchable. We need to still maintain what we have. So from an affordability perspective, I'll get into that too. So while our prices have stayed, as utilities in general, stayed at or below the rate of inflation, there's some pretty significant pressures that are going on. Some of our resources, 50 to 70-year stuff like Jake was talking about, that needs to be replaced now. And the cost to replace it now is much higher than it was when it was built 50 to 70 years ago. So, and then policy goals are what I really want to get at. So policy goals have increased the use of the intermittent resources. It makes it harder to meet capacity needs. You have to vastly overbuild if it's an intermittent source to be able to get the same amount of capacity out of it. This is just a graph I got this from our statewide association, Minnesota Rural Electric Association. That's really a 4-year look at what our costs have done. The cost of our wire has doubled in that 4 years. 2025 numbers aren't out yet. This is 2024. Transformers 80% higher than they were. A substation transformer is tripled probably, Derek, in that amount of time, roughly. On average, about 50% increase in all of the materials we use. And then labor and benefits, 20 to 40% higher. But this one, meeting Minnesota's energy policy requirements forces overbuilding to maintain reliable power supply. And I'll talk about this graph on the top. So absent the carbon-free by 2040 legislation, utilities were planning to build these right here. But because of that, it's adding this much more. So you have to severely overbuild because you have to geographically disperse it. Then you have to have the transmission lines to connect it. So if you put all of your, let's say you put all your wind turbines in southwestern Minnesota, that's not an effective risk strategy, because what if it's not windy in southwestern Minnesota? So there's some in North Dakota and South Dakota and southwestern Minnesota. You got to spread them all over. But that's not where the load is actually used, where the energy is used. So now you have to build transmission lines to connect it to get it to population centers. So it's adding a whole nother layer of cost. And like I showed you before, it's not effective in replacing what was already here. So you still need that too, but now you've added this other layer of cost on top of it. This bottom one, I'll try to explain what this is. It's projected capacity, and installed capacity is this gray line. Let's say you built a 100 megawatt wind farm. That would get in addition to this installed capacity at 100 megawatts. But in reality, you aren't going to get 100 megawatts from that. So you may get that certain days, but you aren't going to get that. And I'll talk about capacity factor in a bit. But in reality, in the real world, even though we're adding that much of nameplate capacity or installed capacity, what we can actually count on getting is going down. What you can really rely on. When you look at a 24/7, 365 year, you can't rely on all of that. So projections are showing by 2035 about half of new installed capacity is driven by state policy decisions. Minnesota's not alone, but we're near the tip of the spear on what we're expecting. MISO estimating we have to build over 3 times more capacity than we've had to build before to meet those policy objectives. So what are we doing about it? I believe the legislature in Minnesota goes into session tomorrow. So not that they don't have other things going on. There's plenty of things going on in Minnesota if you watch the news. Utilities aren't going to be top of their mind, but we will be there. I will take the reliability and affordability concerns down to St. Paul with me. I know our statewide association is going to do the same. Lifting Minnesota's nuclear moratorium is legislative priority number 1 for us. Nuclear is going to be the future and has to be. If we are serious that carbon is the problem, the solution exists. And then some net metering reform, I'll explain that in a bit. That has to do with like a member that has their own generating source. Most cases it's rooftop solar. But the nuclear moratorium, in 2023 when Minnesota passed the carbon free by 2040 legislation, there was no plan on how we were going to get there. You know, we went and we knew this was coming. We were down there in 2022, and then 2023 they finally did it. And the question was posed, how? How do you expect us to do this? And their answer was, you'll figure it out. You'll have to. To me, I mean, that hope is not a plan. There was no defined plan. And let's be serious. There is no carbon-free resource that can provide 24/7 reliable energy absent nuclear. It's the only one that can do that 24/7. So we're the only state in the nation right now that has a total ban on building any new nuclear generation. That has to change. And the time that it needs to change was probably yesterday. It's going to take a long time to permit and construct nuclear facilities. Even if we lift the moratorium, it doesn't mean they're going to start popping up all over. It just means that as utilities in the state, we can start looking at it. Like, is this viable? And you start talking to different stakeholder groups about how you can do it. But right now, nobody's even willing to have those conversations because you're wasting your time. You couldn't build it anyway. So I talked capacity factor a bit. Here's what I mean. This is 2021. It's the most latest one I had from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, but the technology hasn't changed. So nuclear at 93%. What that means, capacity factor is if you have, like, let's just call it the 100 megawatts I talked about before. At full capacity, like, what could you expect full output? At what percentage of the year could you expect full output? Nuclear is about 93%. There are things that there's maintenance that needs to happen. Plants need to come offline. But nearly 100% of the time you can get full output from nuclear generation. Geothermal at 71 is the next most dense, but geothermal is not that viable here. If you get farther west, you know, where there's hot springs and geysers, where the geothermal features are closer to the surface, it can make some sense. It's too deep here. It doesn't make economic sense when you have to go that deep to get it. Coal and gas, 55 for gas, about 50 for coal. Better than renewables, but not like nuclear as far as capacity factor. Hydro 37, wind 36, 35 there. That's about what wind is accredited at by MISO in the upper Midwest. These are national numbers. This one's different. Solar at about 25% on this. Northern Minnesota, it's half of that or less. It's just not a viable solution for decarbonizing the grid up here. You don't get enough out of it. You know, like I said, our system peaks at midnight on the coldest day of the year. It's providing zero. It's not helping us at all. So all the spent fuel from all the nuclear generation since the 50s would fit into one football stadium at a depth of about 10 yards. So a lot of the fear you hear, what do you do about the spent fuel? Where are we going to put the spent fuel? It's not really that big of an issue. It's not like there's mountains of it. All the used nuclear fuel from one person's lifetime would fit in a pop can or a beer can, if that's more your thing. And then land use. This is important too. So land use to put, it's what, 1 million megawatt hours, so 1 billion kilowatt hours. We sell almost that in a year, almost 1 billion kilowatt hours. To do that would take 17,000 acres, 17,000 acres to do that with wind. To do it with solar would take 3,200 acres. But you could do like all of our needs in a year on 100 acres with nuclear generation. So far less impact on land. For us, a lot of it would be forest land. You'd have to do something with or clear it off or whatever. Other parts, it's farmable land. It's good agriculture land. Net metering. What that is, it dictates how we have to buy energy that someone overproduces. Like I said before, most cases that we have is solar that somebody's put at their house. If they end up producing more than they used, we have to buy that back at an average retail rate. even though what they saved us was a wholesale rate. So I didn't have to buy it from Great River Energy, I bought it from one of our members. But if I had to buy that at nearly twice what I could have bought it from GRE for, now there's a problem and there's a subsidy. And when you're in a co-op, somebody that's doing that and making money, they're making it from their neighbors. I mean, we're all in this together, you're all member owners. So what happens then is that those who can afford to do this and oversize a system are doing it to make money, and they're making it on the backs of all the members that can't afford to do it. And Minnesota is the only state in the union that allows somebody to oversize and install an array to make money in the cooperative territory. We get treated differently because we are different. So with the carbon-free by 2040 legislation, we want to seek some change to this because the way it is right now is just not an effective way to help decarbonize. So yeah, I mentioned it raises the cost for everybody while delivering the benefits to the few. And as it gets more and more widespread, that subsidy is going to get worse. So the recent study by Berkeley, and what Berkeley is Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, shows the net metering policies had the second highest impact on increasing rates in states with high or increasing rooftop solar adoption. So what are we looking for? The change we would like to see. We don't want to fight with our members or act like we're anti-solar, because that's not true. I'm anti-subsidy. I'm not anti-solar. But the way it is right now, I can't in good conscience tell members you should do this and make money off your neighbors, because that's where it's coming from. We would like to see legislation change that you can do this, but you have to size it to whatever your load is, meaning you can't have a separate service out in the field that only runs a street light and then install 40 kW with solar. That there's no usage to offset that. You're strictly doing that for money. It has to be sized to load. The other thing we'd like to see is reimbursement at avoided cost. I'd rather buy it from my members if it's the same rate I could buy it from Great River Energy. That makes sense. Last thing for me, and we'll open up for questions, but a couple of upcoming events. There's a power supply tour. I don't know if any of you have gone on that. We've done this every year. It's July 29th to 31st. What you can do, get on a bus, go down to tour Great River Energy's headquarters down in Maple Grove. You get a look at the ACES Northern Trading Center, which is located in GRE's building. If you picture a control room at NASA, that's kind of what it looks like. They're doing all of the energy market participation, the hedging and the trading and participating in day-ahead markets from what power sources on all of our behalf. You can see the Elk River peaking station, natural gas peaking plant down there on the bottom. Go to a Twins game. Registration deadline is quite a ways out. It's in June, but 2 nights stay in Maple Grove with a tour of GRE and a tour of a power plant and a Twins game for $210 a person. Includes transportation too, so a pretty good deal. Project Green Touch coming up sooner. Up in Ely, we'll be at Bearhead Lake State Park May 14th. Every year we'll pick a state park throughout our territory and seek volunteers to come help us clean that up. If you bring some work gloves and our rake, we'll buy you lunch. That's how that works. You get an RSVP for that one to Tammy's on. You can find all this on our website. There's probably a handout up front for this too. We do ask RSVP so that we know how many people are coming, you know how much lunch we got to get. The state will not charge you to come into their state park if you're going to clean it up, which is awful nice of them. But last one, our annual meeting's coming up late April 23rd down in Cromwell this year. So 5 o'clock registration, 6:30 business meeting. Happy to see you there.